Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Critical race theory, first, foremost. I got to be honest. I lived through the end of the Cold War. I remember as a kid, worrying that mutual assured destruction was coming. The Russians were going to bomb us. We were going to bomb them. But wasn't overly crazy. We're kind of worried. That, a couple of old guys could get a little crotchety, like Reagan, because the fear was unpredictable, kind of like Trump they claimed was. Might touch the button by accident, kind of like they did with Trump. So I remember that kind of, fear that you had a little bit. But I remember learning about, the hysteria of the anti-communist era of the 50s, the McCarthy years, and, how everything was about, everyone's around every corner. There's a communist. They're everywhere. And I remember reading this going, how's it possible that you could, look at people you've known for years and go, communist, and then turn them in? And kind of have that society of really kind of craziness and fear and of what you don't know and understand and what you've been told. What you've been told repeatedly to fear. I'm sadly seeing part of that in this insanity over critical race theory. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know everything that it entails. From what I have read, it's really complicated and there's a lot to it. So what I do know, and I know this without without fear of saying, that I doubt that there are any high school or 8th grade history teachers that are teaching this complex theory. And it is just that, it's a theory. So when General Milley is testifying and says, for me, the news took a lot of what General Milley said about critical race theory and about, the woke military that Gates claimed we have. The first thing that he said was, a lot of us have to get much smarter about what critical race theory is. Now, I took that in two ways. One, we do need to know what it is, so that if we have rage, we should at least be enraged about something we understand. And second, I think it was, pointed at Matt Gaetz, who is causing this kind of hysteria about something that he knows nothing about. And this is the thing. We know nothing about it. Our media has done a very poor job of explaining what critical race theory is. What they have really done really well is stoke the fear that it's coming and it's everywhere. It's behind every corner. It's coming for you, and it's gonna spoil your children. It's coming. And look, I think we should have a conversation of what it is. From what I've read, it goes deeper than the superficial reasons why inequality has remained in the African American community, why you have such massive gaps in wealth and achievement and all of these things. It can't just be the line that I grew up hearing of, just lazy. No, it's deeper than that. And I witnessed that as a kid. And it's one of these things where I go and you go, our problems are much deeper than bumper sticker solutions and rationales. I lived in as the minority in a minority community. We weren't on the bus line. That was structural. That was done on purpose. That was to keep people away from going other places. And I live in a community now that won't allow the Corridor 1 light rail plan to go through because, those communities may come here. That is not new. That is structural. And that is real. And to deny that is just, ridiculous. If your goal is, segregation, then admit that. But while I'm looking at Milley's statement, and I'll be honest, my first thought was, if this was 30 years ago, Milley, who, not a guy I'd want to mess with in a back alley, would grab that pencil neck little geek Matt Gaetz and just twist his little Pez dispenser head off. But that we can't do anymore. Those are in the old days. Instead, you've got to look at Matt Gaetz smirking like a snotty little... It's one of those things where you go, is that the best we can do in this country? And I know he's the epitome of Florida man, but come on. So General Milley goes off into this statement, and he says, I want to understand white rage. He says, because I'm white. He goes, I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? He said, I want to find that out. He goes, look, where he's at, it's a military university. It's about, theory. It's about learning. It's about understanding. It's about, scholarship. And it's about actually, understanding what it is that you're against before you're against it. Because we see all across this country, there are communities of just, the Karens are outraged. The Karens are losing their minds that their children might be taught something or might critically think about something. He goes on to say, he goes, look, I've read Karl Marx, I've read Lenin. Doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding? Having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend. And that was the line that got me. What's wrong with understanding? What's wrong with having a conversation in which we maybe know what it's like to live on the other side? Now, I say this all the time. I was misfortunate as a child because we were poor. But I look back on it now and I have a different perspective on a lot of things because of the things I grew up around. And for me, the idea that government policy, and look, I'm someone who believes in government policy. I believe in government action. I believe our government should be doing the things that we need done. Those things that individually we can't accomplish, that we need to do collectively, we do through our government. Making sure that people have homes, ending homelessness, educating the populace, defending the country, paving roads and bridges and infrastructure, go to healthcare for everybody, those kind of things that we individually cannot do. But as a society, we pull together collectively to do. I saw how policy was used to divide poverty communities. Now you could say, it was equally divided between white and black, and that is, quite frankly, that is possible. That is true. Because when they brought out the welfare programs that said there couldn't be a man in the household, that wasn't based solely on color. But how it was enforced may be a little different. Because I do remember the welfare inspectors coming around, knocking on doors and making sure there was no one there. We don't talk about that stuff anymore. We don't talk about how the policies that we've put into place create an environment that broke up families. And we should understand that. We should talk about it. And look, we did a civil rights tour a couple of years ago where, the woman who gave me a fabulous tour of historic Stagville, which if you're ever in Durham, North Carolina, by all means, just stop by and visit and understand the history of the civil rights era or the slavery era. This was a slave plantation. This was a place where, quite frankly, as the lady explained, the slaves had better living conditions than the white folks did on the other side of the fence. But the white folks were, They were white, so they felt superior. And that tension was always put there. And they were pitted against one another. And again, I go back to what I talked about yesterday. My goal is not to look at race or gender or sexual orientation or any of those things. My goal is, how do we make lives better? How do we make jobs better? How do we make an economy that works for everyone? Because what happens is we get tied up in this stuff. We get tied up in, well, the media machine has brought a new boogeyman. And the new boogeyman is CRT. And you don't have to know what it is. You just have to know to be afraid of it. You don't have to get the principles behind it. You don't have to get anything other than it's bad. And it's coming for you and your children. That's all you need to know. And that it's working. It's working really well. Instead of us being critical thinkers who are asking, why do we have policies like this? How is it that we've created a two America setup? How is it that we have a school to prison pipeline in certain communities and not others? How is that possible? And which policies got us there? I don't think that's a bad thing to talk about. Now, the Laura Ingrams of the world and the folks on the far right losing their ever-loving freaking minds. Laura Ingraham not happy, saying, we're paying for that? Why is Congress not saying, we're not going to give you a penny until all of this is eradicated from the military budget? Nothing, she said. This is my offer to you, nothing. That's what I would say. I'm totally outraged by him and his ridiculous response today to General Milley. Outraged. Totally outraged. Not just outraged, but totally outraged. Over something that I guarantee none of the people who are being fed by the rage machine, or having the grievance red meat jammed down their throat, even understand. Because look, I've spent a lot of time reading on this stuff, and it is complicated. We are not going to be breaking this out to the kindergarten class. This is not something that little 5-year-olds are going to be studying instead of recess. This is complicated stuff, but it's stuff that as a society, I think we need to be able to understand. I think we need to be able to understand complex ideas. I think we need to be able to understand more than just simple bumper sticker sloganeering that we hear thrown at us repeatedly on the propaganda channels that aren't news. I mean, because Fox News is already cat's out of the bag. If you didn't know, they basically said no reasonable person would ever believe us. Lawsuit. I love courts, especially when there are people with a gavel saying, I'll throw you in jail for lying. But this is where we're in this weird world. Because so much of what we're being told is fact is not. And it's brilliant how they have done the kind of things that they've gotten away with. When someone like General Milley is being, called woke, and is someone who, has fought for our country and is being, pushed in these ways, it's really quite amazing to me. And I'll be honest, the country has changed from when I grew up, and it's changed in ways that I don't know are great. When you can have someone like Matt Gaetz, who's accused of multiple felonies, child sex trafficking, good on the list, and have never served in the military, and then questioning with a smirk on his face someone like General Milley. I understand. I understand our civilian leaders aren't, that's the power of the purse. Their job is the question. I get all that. But there's got to be some bit of respect. And for the rest of us, my mind keeps going back to that era of the anti-communist hysteria of the 50s, and the stories that I read, and the people that I talked to who lived through it, who there was real fear. that someone would label you a communist and that you would be blacklisted. We're living through kind of the same stuff in this moment. And it's all across the board. And it's because we're not willing to talk to each other. We're not willing to have difficult conversations. We're not willing to critically think about stuff. It's about our team. We've staked our flag, and we're sticking to it. And that's a little frustrating to me because, as I've always believed until the last couple of years that you can sit down and you can hammer out an agreement. That I always believed that, it didn't matter, as Americans, we all wanted kind of the same stuff. But it seems to me that we are growing apart, not just politically, not just because, of Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer or however you want to create that division, but because we're pulling apart. And for me, it comes back to that hope and opportunity. It comes back to those ways of making lives better that don't seem to be there. And it's kind of like a Hunger Games scenario. I've got mine, nothing for you. I pulled myself up I got the last set of bootstraps that were made. The rest of them, cheap crap from China. The heck with you. And I wonder how we get back to a place where there is more than this. And for someone like Matt Gaetz, I'm hoping voters in Florida look at this guy and go, you know what? Even though he is the epitome of Florida guy, we should get better. We deserve better. But sadly, the way things are gerrymandered up, the way the districts are drawn and contorted, and how we've been pitted against one another, and this team sport mentality is firmly in hold. I have very little hope that the voters of Florida will throw him out. I have very little hope that Marjorie Taylor Greene goes. So we're stuck with this. And it's only going to get worse. And I wonder how we come back from it. Can we have these conversations about things like critical race theory? I'd love someone to explain to me what it is and why we should be so afraid of it. And you can do that. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend, later in the show, Greg Palast, going to be here talking about voter. But when we come back, Frances Perkins' grandson's going to be here to share some thoughts on what he hopes the Biden administration does. Right back.
Then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day spontaneous protest strikes began against the new Taft-Hartley Act. 250,000 soft coal miners in Pennsylvania walked out of the pits. 102,000 shipyard workers of the CIO's Industrial Union of Marine and Shipbuilding Workers followed the miners' example on the East and Gulf Coasts. The Greater Akron Area Council of Labor Unions joined AFL and CIO councils representing 185,000 workers, demanded that top union leaders call a general strike in defense of labor's civil liberties. Workers at Chrysler's Courchevel plant walked out in protest, even as the nation's steel mills and auto plants began to slow from the absence of coal. Congressman Fred Hartley, co-author of the Slave Labor Bill, denounced the UMW as mutinous citizens and demanded immediate enforcement of the act against the walkout. Millions of trade unionists, white hot with anger at the repressive, union-busting legislation, were ready for job actions. But in this instance, William Green, head of the AFL, and Philip Murray, head of the CIO, were agreed in their opposition to general strike action. William Green reported that he had been flooded with appeals from AFL unions across the country calling for a general strike. He feared taking strike action would invite lawsuits and favored fighting through the courts and private contracts. Murray echoed Green and rejected any talk of a general protest strike. He invited leaders of the AFL and the Railroad Brotherhoods to join the CIO in a two-pronged fight against Taft-Hartley. Murray looked to challenge the Act's constitutionality in the courts and hoped to unseat the congressman who passed it in the 1948 election. Unions are still hamstrung by many of the Act's devastating provisions.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Fox News poll. Yes, Fox News. 56% of the folks over at Fox News gave Joe Biden the thumbs up. That's up from 54% in April and May. So even they're getting it, that things are getting better. And look, the 64% of people said that Joe Biden's doing really well on the pandemic. They're improving his arsenal of vaccines, moving us in the right direction and helping even 4 in 10 Republicans. I think that's a pretty big thing. And look, he's doing a great job. I'm happy with what he's done thus far. And now we've got this possibility of a big, decent-sized infrastructure plan that could tick up a little bit more. As it appears, President Biden is listening to those who have been saying, look, go back to the past a little bit. Look to the FDR years. Bring back some of that New Deal stuff. Let's do things for the future. And here to share some thoughts on maybe how we get to some of that. Again, channeling the past. I've asked Tomlin Perkins Coggleshell to come talk with us. Tomlin is the grandson of Frances Perkins, FDR's labor secretary, and for me, a labor icon, someone who made work so much better in this country and did so many things that we, take for granted today. But we thank her anyway. Tomlin, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Rick.
So let's look at that poll. Start off. 56% of the Fox viewers say, "Hey, yeah, he's doing all right. We're okay with it. We approve."
That is very encouraging. That's off on the right foot, and I think this compromise between Republicans and Democrats on the infrastructure bill has a great potential, and it may be less than Biden was hoping for in the beginning, but my grandmother was always one to take what she could get and then move on to the next kind of step in legislation. So
yeah, you got to progressively make things better. And this is something that I keep telling my friends. You take what we can get and keep working and keep moving forward, because we're not going to get it all at once. We take what we can and move forward. Yes.
She was known as a half-a-loaf girl back in the earlier days of her political career in New York State, when she was negotiating for a 54-hour work week for women, and they had to exclude the cannery workers and to make the bill go through. And she was very upset that she had to do that. But her mentor, Florence Kelly, embraced her and said, "You did a fabulous job." She was kind of coming to meet with her my grandmother with her tail between her legs, because she hadn't gotten the full thing. But that was her taste of getting as much as you can and then going forward from there.
No, I mean, workers in this country owe a debt of gratitude to your grandmother's legacy, because one of the things that we had done a number of years ago, back in 2013, we did a labor history tour, and one of the places we ended up was the Brown Building at New York University, where the building of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire had happened. And I remember walking through this building with and on the floor where these people were trapped in this building and just burning to death. I remember just having this eerie and this horrible feeling. And as I read more about it, it was one of the things that really propelled your grandmother into pushing for better labor rights and for better safe working conditions.
Oh yes, absolutely. That was kind of actually the real beginning of her career in a way, because she happened to be next door having tea with a friend when the fire broke out, and they heard the whistle, the fire bells, and the trucks coming, and went to see what was happening. And she witnessed people having to jump out of the 8th and 9th floor of what was then called the Ash Building at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory on those 2 floors. And it galvanized her. It propelled her to really focus on how we can improve things. And she became a member of the Committee on Safety that came after the fire. It was a New York City committee to determine what could be done to prevent something like that in the future. And exit signs came out of that committee, and fire extinguishers and locked doors not being locked, and the owners of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory were afraid of pilferage and a few shirtwaists walking off, so they locked all the doors, and it was a dreadful thing. But she did say later in life, looking back on that time, that it was the day the New Deal began, at least for her.
Yeah, I mean, because I can't imagine. I mean, you hear people tell stories about 9/11 and people jumping to their death. Imagine, that happening, in the workplace, simply because someone didn't want some scraps to be taken. I mean, that's
Yes.
the horrible part in this for me is how little the quote unquote loss could have been when you look at the grand scheme of things. And you had these people jumping to their deaths, and their bodies cracking the sidewalks. And I mean, the stories that I've heard were just, I can't imagine how it wouldn't change you.
Right, absolutely. She began working for improved conditions, and she was a member of the Factory Investigating Commission that came out of that was a state commission that came out of the factory fire, and she led legislators through factories to their supposed exits, which were just pretty minimal, a window through which you climbed and down to a ladder that had icicles on it and ended 8 feet above the ground. So she made the point with her legislator friends, including Al Smith, who she knew from working on that committee, the Committee on Safety that came after the fire. Al Smith became a good friend of hers, and eventually he promoted or invited her to be on what was called the Commission on Industrial Safety in New York State, that eventually became the Department of Labor in New York State.
Yeah, and you hear these stories, and look, I have people tell me all the time, well, we needed unions back then, Tomlin. We needed a voice in the job back then. Unions are outdated. We don't need them anymore because we're so much better than that now, because we've got all these wonderful laws. And yet you look at some place like Amazon, who's churning through people at an alarming rate. The injury rates are through the roof. All kinds of all of the negative things. Maybe not to the extent of people jumping to their deaths anymore, but still things that are not great. And I wonder, who the next generation of Frances Perkins are going to be. And I wonder what your grandmother would have said, in this era, if she saw the things that are going on.
Well, I know she would have wanted to, chase down the worst offenders and make examples of them, and improve working conditions for everyone. Going forward, her kind of motto, if you will, or her belief was that the government's role in life, in our lives, is to give the people under its jurisdiction the best possible life. And she would have done that, whether it was for Amazon employees or airline employees, fast food workers, everyone she would have been caring about.
And the reason I bring this up is because we're in the moment right now. I think Joe Biden, at least in my lifetime, has been the most pro-labor president to this moment. The fact of the matter is, and this is sad, but so far, Joe Biden has done more for the labor movement, in my view, than the last couple Democratic presidents. Day one fired Peter Robb and his number two. For me, that was a big part of it. But some of the executive orders, and then coming out and saying, look, you should have the right to join unions. We're going to encourage people to do this. We're going to go back to the intent of a government that encourages people to join and form unions and fight for better wages, hours, and conditions, and make safe working places. And to me, that organizing, that has to happen to keep pushing him and to keep pushing the Joe Manchins and all of these politicians into doing what we have to have done.
Right, absolutely. The right to organize and the right to assemble and discuss labor issues was very high on my grandmother's list. When FDR appointed her to be Secretary of Labor, she tried to convince him that he didn't want her. He wanted a good labor person, someone from the labor community. And sure enough, when she was appointed, labor at first was finding her appointment just, over the top, way too, awful. How could we do this? But then she soon proved herself to be a friend of labor, and has very much supported the right to organize and build unions. And in fact, there's a fun story of her in Homestead, Pennsylvania, where there was a steelworkers strike. She went down to try to help sort it out, and she wanted the workers to come together to talk about a union. And the mill workers denied them use of their facilities. The town denied them use of their town hall. And then she thought of the federal post office, that she could use the post office for everyone to assemble. So everybody went up to the post office on federal ground to talk about union.
No, there are some of those really incredible stories, and there's also the one, and maybe you'll tell me if it's true or not, that she wanted to do something, and FDR told her, well, get out there and make me do it, and organize and get people to push. And this is where my mindset goes. We as working people in this country, we want good wages, we want good working conditions, we want health care and retirement security, we want the things that my grandparents' generation fought for. How we do that is we have to organize. We have to push for it. We have to demand it. Joe Biden is a good guy. I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah.
But he needs the backing of people to say, we demand that you do it.
Yes, absolutely. And she would have definitely been right there organizing and supporting efforts to improve life for everyone. She was a real pioneer, and she broke ceilings, glass or otherwise. I keep getting goosebumps when I think about her.
No, it's an incredible legacy, and one that I don't know that in this country we've done enough to educate the populace about. I mean, as I said at the beginning, a lot of the things that we take for granted. Unemployment insurance. We got through this pandemic because, a lot of people were able to get unemployment insurance. In part, she was a big part of that. Workers' compensation.
Oh, yeah.
She was a big part of that. You go through all of these things that the 54-hour work week, which eventually became the 40-hour work week. All things that we now take for granted. Somebody fought for, and her name was Frances Perkins.
That's right, Rick. Thank you for highlighting that. And she did. She came to FDR with a list of things she wanted to work on if she was going to be Secretary of Labor, even though they had known each other for 4 years while he was governor of New York and she was his commissioner of labor in the state of New York. When it came time to be, when he was elected president and would she be his Secretary of Labor, she brought a list of things that she wanted to work on. Otherwise, she really didn't want to do it. She wanted to make a difference. She wanted to get something done. And on that list, I'm not sure I can recite the whole thing, but old age pension, which became Social Security, that workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, direct aid to the states whose coffers were then running out of money to help their unemployed, a number of other measures that would become the New Deal, really. And later in her career, partway through perhaps the Roosevelt administration, a magazine called Collier's wrote an article saying maybe it wasn't so much the Roosevelt New Deal as the Perkins New Deal. Here I am tooting my grandmother's horn, but really, she did a lot to break ground, and get it done.
And rightly so. But here's the thing, and this is, I give her a lot of credit, and she deserves all of that. But this was the organizing of the time. There were people who were doing this as well, and she was tuned into that, which she took their fights on into the higher halls of power. As I understand, now clearly you're the expert in this, but as I understood it, she was tuned into these, and she understood the right fights, and that's what I think is really quite amazing.
Yeah, she picked the right fights, and she didn't care who got the credit for getting things done. She liked to be out of the limelight, sub rosa, getting things done, and not taking the credit necessarily.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on, this administration now? I mean, we're in a divided moment. We've got a 50-50 Senate. There are so many things I would like to see done that probably aren't going to get done. How do you think your grandmother would fare in this moment that we're in right now?
Well, I do think that she would have been pleased that we reached an agreement, or it seems like we've reached an agreement. It hasn't really gone through yet, but for this bipartisan approach to the infrastructure bill, she would have been the half a loaf. It isn't his full bill, but or his full American Jobs Plan, but it is a good chunk of it. And there certainly can be follow-on legislation that comes along and follows up on it. I don't know how I know she would be for the the voting rights bill that's yet to come up, and I'm not sure how she would. I'm pretty sure she would be very much in favor of reducing the power of the filibuster in favor of passing that bill, partly because the filibuster was designed in the 1800s or so. It wasn't part of the original Constitution, as we probably all know, to limit the power of the black vote. And here it is again, the same thing. So I think it might be time to look at amending the filibuster.
Yeah, as I always say, it seems to be all good ideas go to the Senate to die, and here's some other ones.
Right.
Last question I've got for you. She was one of the people behind the National Labor Relations Act, which built the largest, most prosperous working class in the history of this country, and it's been destroyed. The last 74 years. Taft-Hartley forward. What do you think she would think of where we are in this moment and where we need to go?
Well, gosh, it's hard to project exactly what she would think, but I think she would be very much for the infrastructure. I think she would be for providing training for people. There was a piece of the New Deal legislation, the WPA, or actually it might have been in one of the other programs, but that provided an employment service for the United States, where the government becomes the employer of last resort. Yep. And those programs never became permanent for some reason, but now I think she would have agreed that we need a permanent employment service.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, that actually grows and shrinks depending on the private industry's need for, the health of the industry and the need for workers. So
I'm right there with you.
Great.
But real quick, I wanted to point out the fact that you still run the Frances Perkins Center, the website, francesperkinscenter.org. Up in Maine, a place that eventually I want to visit.
Yay.
I hope people will take a look at the website, francesperkinscenter.org. We'll get links out. But Tomlin, I appreciate you taking some time with us. Great talking with you. Thank you so much.
You bet. Same here. Thank you, Rick.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you, everyone.
Tomlin. Again, make sure you check out the website, the francesperkinscenter.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1971. At 2:51 a.m., Battalion 12 Chief Leo Najarian of Los Angeles heard that there had been a tunnel explosion. That February, a 6.5 earthquake had killed 65 people in the area. Now it seemed tragedy had struck again. Just the night before, Chief Najarian had been called out to the same address. The Lockheed Shipbuilding and Construction Company was digging a tunnel over a mile mile long for the Metropolitan Water District. Chief Najarian had been called out when 4 workers were injured due to a minor explosion. He had found that the workers at the site were not testing frequently enough for methane gas. One spark from a tool could touch off an explosion. Leaving instructions to test more frequently, he left and spent the next day worried. So when another explosion alarm came from the same address, he rushed to the scene. There he found the second explosion was much worse than the first. Workers were trapped 5 miles into the tunnel. Rescue workers attempted to reach the trapped miners through a vent shaft near their position. Paul Badgley, a miner at the scene, was part of 4 rescue attempts. He described the heartbreaking effort, stating, quote, "The first time we went in there, I could hear the guys hollering for help. The third and fourth time, I couldn't hear them. It's a hell of a feeling not being able to help them when you hear them hollering." 17 workers lost their lives. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the Lockheed Company was put on trial and fined heavily for their negligence. California passed stricter mining and tunnel laws and established a state occupational safety and health administration. 19 Los Angeles firefighters were awarded the Medal of Valor for their bravery. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're supposed to have Greg Palast come on and talk a little bit about the information that he came across of Georgia purging voters. And, it came down to, he has a new video out that I find interesting. Again, it's one of those things that, he has done just incredible work. He's done incredible work trying to weed out all of the basically the theft that's been going on of our vote in places like Georgia. And as he said today, they came across the fact that something like over 300,000, like 364,000 Georgia voters were under attack. And because what's going on is, you have these people who are trying to challenge, people's right to vote. So this is the video that he put out. And I think it was, it's one of those interesting kind of things. Let's take a quick look at this.
We're about to meet with a GOP official who says that she has personal knowledge that 32,000 people are voting illegally in this county.
So my name is Pamela Reardon. I am currently 6th District Committee woman to the state party. I know for sure voters do not live here.
Altogether, Reardon and her cronies are challenging 364,000 citizens' right to vote. This year, Georgia's GOP-controlled legislature passed a new law saying you can challenge an unlimited number of voters. Do you know this woman? Do you recognize that woman?
Not offhand. I don't.
Okay, you never spoke to her?
No.
What about this guy and his wife on his honeymoon? Do you recognize that man?
No.
So you didn't call him, but you challenged his right to vote or have his ballot challenged.
Sir, get out of my house.
Okay, I will get out of your house. ACLU of Georgia attorney Rahul Garabadu.
The challenge statute didn't ever contemplate someone coming to town and challenging hundreds of thousands of voters at one time. This, in our view, was an abuse of that statute. That doesn't mean that you get to print out reams and reams of Excel spreadsheets and just, levy a charge against thousands of people that you don't even know and get them, removed off the rolls.
The 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act makes voter intimidation a crime. Imagine using the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Here is NAACP lawyer Gerald A. Griggs.
It gets real when you get arrested. It gets real.
You heard of the Ku Klux Klan law of 1871?
I'm from Canada.
So you don't know the Ku Klux Klan law?
I'm from Canada.
You clearly don't know Georgia law. He's a legal
I got
voter.
my right to vote in '94. So I don't like people voting illegally. Get out of my house now.
I shall get out of your house
Before
now.
I throw you.
And you are sure that this is your legal voting address?
You are.
Georgia, divided down the middle, and this civil war ain't over. This is Greg Palast in Georgia, reporting.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I love Greg Palast, one of my favorite folks, and does some of just the best investigative reporting. And you know, I'm looking at this, and as he points out, 364,000 votes are being challenged, and they're being challenged because in the states you can challenge someone's vote. You can say, well, I know that person doesn't live here. I have proof. You know, whatever. This group, this big money group, and these people are going and saying, no, all of these people who have interesting sounding names, who came from the same plantation, all of these people, they didn't live here. And again, this is using the law in a very new way, but it's a way to make sure that they can gum up the system. These are people who don't believe in democracy. These are people who don't believe in your right to vote or mine. It's about pure power. And, this is, and what's amazing to me is it's Greg Palast is one of the only people out there who is actually looking into this and is following this. Because, we heard, Senate bill, the SB 202 was to make voting better. Not so much. And now we find out that, 100, what I think, what did he say? Over 100,000 people have been purged off the rolls already. And you start looking at some of this and you just start going, there are serious problems here. There are serious problems with a system that allows people who, who are willing to violate the law or the spirit of the law to get away with this stuff. And ultimately what it's going to be about, and this is what's frustrating to me, that we can't get something done on the federal level, because all of this stuff would have been ruled unconstitutional under the Voting Rights Act before John Roberts and the Supreme Court undid it. Before their attack on voting, this would have never been allowed to have happened. But what's going on is you have all these organizations who see their path to victory. Not about democracy. It's not about making sure people vote. It's not about the good of the country. It's about none of that stuff. It's clearly about power. It's about winning the next election. That's all it's about. They see this as a way to kick people off the rolls and get people spending a lot of energy. Now, look, I've said for a while, I don't think the For the People Act is going to pass. I just don't. I think Joe Manchin's going to screw that up. I think Kelly Sinema is going to screw that. I don't know why I keep calling her Kelly. Maybe because it reminds. Never mind. But Christian Sinema going to screw that up. And what it means is, the states like Georgia who have gotten away with this and are, Republican-led top to bottom are going to stop people's ability to vote. And they're going to purge people. We've already seen the playbook. They're going to block people's ability to vote early. They're going to question ballots of signatures because, a lot of them have to have signature verification. Every trick in the book. And it's not about voting. It's not about who gets the most votes wins. It's coming down to who can block the most people from voting on the Republican side. And look, I'll be honest. If I'm a Republican, honestly, if I am, this is my only way, because their numbers are dwindling, their ideology has failed, and it's created this rage. We're living. I was thinking about this yesterday after the show. I go back to when I was a kid, and there was a moment where this idea that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. There was always a job to be had. You could do something, and you could make a reasonable living, and you could move up. And in my experience, that's how it was. I was able to get a decent job. I was able to parlay that into another job, and things got better. And that was like that for a lot of people. And the wages were reasonable. Our standard of living was higher. And then came the policies that the Reagan administration brought in. We lowered the top marginal tax rate from 70% down to 28%. We started spending like drunken sailors on the credit card, blowing up the national debt, running up deficits, recession, all kinds of stuff. We taxed unemployment benefits. So if you collected unemployment benefits and have to pay federal tax on it, you can thank Ronald Reagan for that. You go through all of this stuff. And it changed fundamentally the New Deal era of how the economy was to work. It changed fundamentally how labor and employment interacted. It changed fundamentally the things that my grandparents fought for, and we created the wealthiest, largest, most prosperous billionaire class in the history of civilization. Good on us. And we've done that through a lower standard of living. We've done that through lower wages, less health care, all of those things. Mission accomplished, because that was the goal. The goal was to, quote unquote, save the free enterprise system and to rig the game the other way. And that's what they did. And now the only way that they can hold on to power is by convincing us that the boogeyman is around the corner. Critical race theory is going to destroy all of us. And that those people are coming to take the last cookie in the jar, even though they never dropped off the bag. So we're in an interesting moment. And like I said, if I were a Republican, this is the only way you can win. Now, find it interesting, Michigan, the Michigan Republican Party, the Senate Oversight Committee in the Michigan state government, they issued a report yesterday that said no evidence of widespread or systematic fraud. Nothing. There's nothing there. Basically totally rejecting Donald Trump and all of his minions' argument that the election was stolen from him. So you've got the Senate Republicans saying, no, we can't find it. Wish we could. Wish it was there. It's not. Yet the legislature in Michigan is doubling their efforts to push for overhauling the state's election laws, requiring voter ID stuff, only being able to cast provisional ballots, no more early ballots, restricting hours for voters to drop ballots into boxes. All the things that were popular, they're restricting. And all the things that Democrats used. And this is the weird, short-sighted part of this. And this is where, there's part of me that goes, the Republicans are hurting themselves. And this is where I've said from the start, the energy that we're pushing into getting the For the People Act passed, which is never going to pass, we should be putting into getting people IDs, getting people the infrastructure to get over these hurdles so that we beat them at their own game. Because potentially, who's not going to be able to overcome a lot of these hurdles? Their voters. Because understand, overwhelmingly, their voters seem to be older and whiter. A lot older. And getting older by the day. And I know my grandmother, when she was at the end of her life, her driver's license had been expired like 15 years before she passed. And you need a driver's license to vote in a lot of states. So there's part of me that goes, they're hurting themselves long term. They've got it in their mind that we lost the last election because people voted by mail, because Democrats said, you know what, I think I'm going to be safe. People like me said, I don't want to go stand in line. You're going to mail me the ballot. I can turn it back in and I can know it was counted. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Their voters could do it too. And here's the really important part. Because the voter who wins almost every election, the category of voter that wins, almost every election, hands down, is didn't vote. They usually win. I know it's a tough thing to understand, but the people who don't participate, they're usually the majority of the voters. And it's one of those things that you go, how'd that happen? And if we made it easier to vote, could you not pull them in and maybe convince them of your ideology? New voters, new opportunities to push ideas, new opportunities to come up with policy that are going to make people's lives better. Opportunity. Yeah. Problem is, what we've found out is the Republicans don't really have any ideology anymore. This is what Trump broke, and broke it pretty badly. I don't ever remember there being a political party, at least not in my lifetime, that didn't have a platform. I mean, this is the weird part. How do you not have a platform? How does the Republican National Committee go, yeah, whatever he said? How does that happen? Unless you're completely broken and devoid of ideas and afraid to write down the fact that you don't have any ideas. Sorry, we're bankrupt. I don't know that goes well, but that's basically where they are. Bankrupt. So cheating, back to where I started and back to where Greg Palast was supposed to walk me through this investigation. Cheating is the only way they can win. Throwing 364,000 people from Georgia off the voting rolls. The only way they can win. And the person that he talked to, this Pamela Reardon woman, who challenged the vote of over 32,000 people that she's never met, is quite remarkable. And it's one of those things where you just go, how is it that the law was so badly written that allows this to happen? Now, me personally, I think she should be arrested for making a false report. If she can't prove every one of those 32,379 voters in Cobb County voted illegally, if she can't prove that, somebody should be able to sue her. She should be going to jail. Something. There has to be a penalty. There has to be a penalty to lying. There has to be a penalty to cheating. There has to be a penalty to stealing. Yes, those are religious things that the religious community likes to tell us we want those 10 rules everywhere, but we forget about. Because it seems to me like the GOP has turned into, well, let's see how many of those 10 rules we can break. Because we don't actually know them. Because they won't let us plaster them everywhere. It's crazy. Crazy times. And hey, for my friends in Pennsylvania, the same kind of nonsense is being banged around in our legislature. And if it not for a particular governor, Governor Wolf, the same kind of crazy that's going on in Georgia could happen here in Pennsylvania. Which is why we do not need a Republican governor in 2022. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1880. Chicago labor leader Agnes Nestor was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Her father had been a machinist and a member of the Knights of Labor. Like many other families of the era, the Nestor family moved to Chicago during the Depression that swept the country in the mid-1890s. Agnes went to work at a glove-making factory. At the factory, the women were charged for the power it took to run the sewing machines. They also had to pay for the needles they used. Agnes helped to lead a successful strike against these practices. The strike was supported by the men's union at the plant. Agnes recalled the aims of the strike, saying, "No more machine rent, no paying for needles, free machine oil, union shop, raises for the cutters who were paid the lowest wages." Agnes went on to describe the day-to-day organization of the strike, saying, "We joined the picket line again and held meetings every day and evening in the hall the cutters had rented. How important we felt. Speakers sent to our evening meetings were furnished by the Chicago Federation of Labor Organization Committee. After the strike had lasted more than a week, management sent letters to the employees offering to meet almost all of their demands. However, they refused to recognize the union. The women turned down the proposal, and after 10 days, the women won their demands, including the right for union representation. In 1902, Agnes led the women glove makers on a campaign to form their own union. She also served as the president of the Chicago Women Trade Union League for more than 40 years. Agnes Nestor spent her life fighting for women's right to vote, the 8-hour day, and child labor protections. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Those in the know say that we the people should forget any progressive fantasy that, at long last, Washington might finally produce the kind of bold FDR-style agenda that America needs. They smugly lecture us that recalcitrant Republicans in Congress, not to mention a swarm of corporate lobbyists, are opposed to progressive change, so who would get it passed? Here's an idea. Try the people themselves. Those in the know don't seem to know it, or don't want us to know it, but big majorities across grassroots America are strongly in favor of the fundamental changes that Washington elites are rejecting. For example, 2/3 of America, including a majority of moderate Republicans, say yes to doubling the minimum wage. 72% of the people, including 46% of professed Republicans, shout their approval for Medicare for all. 8 out of 10 Americans, including strong majorities of Republicans, support a paid family leave program like every other developed nation provides for their people. What about increasing taxes on the rich, expanding Medicaid for poor families, raising teacher pay, spending more for early childhood education? Yes, 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 say majorities, not just in blue states, but also in GOP strongholds like Idaho, Nebraska, and Utah. These are not just poll numbers, but solid ideas embraced last year by a broad cross-section of voters in ballot elections across the country. For example, Florida voters enacted a constitutional initiative to up the state's minimum pay to $15, with yeas topping nays by a whopping margin of more than 20 points, making it even more popular than either Trump or Biden. This is Jim Hightower saying, instead of fearing the people, Democratic leaders need to get out of Washington and join the people. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news today. Let's start off on the good news front. The International Brotherhood of Teamsters, my union, yes, they voted in the affirmative to unionize Amazon workers. They're going to set aside a significant sum of resources for the goal of organizing the workers there. And look, at the end of the day, they have to. When you have a scenario where you're representing an industry like UPS workers who are making good family-sustaining wages, $25, $30 an hour with the best health care and a good retirement plan, you can't have the behemoth in the room come and completely undercut that and destroy the entire situation, which is what Amazon is doing. I think the number I saw was like $16 an hour without health care, because you're working for a logistics company or somebody else. Their aim is to lower wages for everyone. But hey, you might get cheaper prices. But that doesn't really matter much if you don't have any money. Just my thoughts. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. One of my favorite reporters in the entire free world, our good friend Sarah Burris. She's a reporter over at RawStory. Their website, rawstory.com. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
I'm only your favorite because I show up every Thursday.
No, you've been one of my favorite people for a very long time. We've been friends a while. I mean, even before you were one of the fabulous reporters, you were a good labor person.
That's true. I used to work for the unions, and then I used to do your show when I was at BNR, which is now the American Independent. I think it's been through like 7 different name changes. So yeah, those were the good old days.
Yeah, we're going back a long, long time.
Yeah, I think probably like 2 or 3 years we might be hitting the 10-year mark.
Yeah, at least somewhere in that range. But look, the work you do, fabulous stuff. Let's start with, since you do have a labor background, thoughts on the Teamster story?
Oh, I'm excited. I really, really wish that we could organize all Amazon workers. I think it would be really great to have a huge strike to show why it's important, like right on Prime Day. I think that would be really helpful to help people understand why it's important to pay people who are doing the kind of work that, you should actually be paid a good wage to do. So, but, I love the Teamsters. So, I'm excited about this, but I want more.
No, I do too. But ultimately, it's going to come down to we need to have major labor law reform because the obstacles are going to be enormous. Because you're dealing with a company that literally spent $200 billion to deny workers the ability to organize in a place in Alabama where it's a right to work state and people didn't have to join anyway. Imagine what they would do in a state like Pennsylvania, the amount of money that they would pour into. And maybe that's the future. Maybe we just, we organize in these places and make them spend hundreds of billions of dollars. And maybe that's how we get money into the economy.
I mean, I think the thing about this is that they would not be dumping this amount of money into a state like that unless it really was, there was really a chance of this happening. And the fact that something like that could actually be plausible in Alabama, I think that says a lot about where we are in terms of the economy. But also, I would hope this uprising, this class uprising of people who are finally starting to understand that the corps are not going to be nice to you. They're not going to take care of you. So you need to fight for yourself.
Yeah, there are no benevolent corporations. They're just not. It is what it is. Sadly. Let's get to the top stories of the day. Let's start with Rudy Giuliani, law license, gone, suspended.
Oh.
Poor Rudy.
Not completely done.
Suspended.
It's suspended pending his investigation. But a lot of the folks that I follow, a lot of the former prosecutors and legal nerds that I follow, pretty much think this is the beginning of the end for him. And it says in the court documents, like there is documented proof over and over and over again of him lying in court, which it turns out you really can't do.
Yeah, it's called perjury. There's a law against that.
Yeah, it's really not. It's a bad ethics thing on in terms of those bar guys.
Yeah, courts don't take opinion very well.
Yeah, or conspiracy theories. We saw a judge earlier this week who at one of the insurrectionist hearings just went off on Congress about it. So I feel like this is sort of a really big week for the judicial branch of government standing up and being like, like we're over this. This is not cool anymore.
Yeah, and now could Rudy go with the defense of, like almost like an ignorance kind of thing? I thought I was in front of Judge Pyro. Or what's your name? Perino? Pyro?
Perino.
The loud one.
Piro,
there you go.
Piro.
I thought I was in front of her. I thought I was doing her show. I didn't realize it was an actual court of law.
Well, then you would bring up the question of is he mentally incapacitated? If you don't know the difference between standing up in court in front of a judge and arguing a case versus appearing on Fox News, then you're probably going to have your license taken away anyway. Look at Lynn Wood.
Yeah. Or the other one, that's Sidney Powell. She's crazy too. But here's the fun part today was watching Rudy's kid go ballistic and not have his camera right. He got like half the chin. God.
Oh my God, that was so embarrassing. But to be fair, like I was really distracted by the beautiful trees behind him. That was lovely.
Was that the Four Seasons Landscaping Company?
I don't know, but those were lovely landscaped trees and a beautiful rock wall. So clearly whatever he was saying was not capturing my attention for quite a while. So I did have to watch it a few times, but it was just sort of get cut off. It was so embarrassing. I mean, to be fair, he has that weird lip thing and a really big forehead. So I mean, he does need a whole lot of camera room for just that amount of space. But yeah, learn to use your camera if you're going to run for governor at the age of 35.
Yeah. Good luck on that. Although I got to tell you, my Twitter timeline was full of Chris Farley pretending to be him, which I thought was quite interesting.
That's awesome. Oh my God, I forgot about that. I remember I was in probably middle school, and I was just sort of starting to watch David Letterman as a kid, and I remember him making fun of Andrew Giuliani when Rudy was sworn in. And it took me it's been probably a year before I was like, oh man, that's the same dude. I totally forgot about that.
I'm not in favor of making fun of kids. He's older now. Now we can make fun of him.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's a long track record.
Yeah. Now I understand. Rudy, having the law license suspended today, had a lot going on, but evidently didn't bother showing up for his court hearing in the defamation case with Dominion. Although the My Pillow guy, he showed up.
Of course he did, because any opportunity for him to show up somewhere and start talking, I think he's gonna show up. But yeah, this is the Dominion case with Sidney Powell, Rudy, and the My Pillow dude, Mike Lindell. All of them with their attorneys today, arguing before the judge, and it seems like it went on for a very long time, and I didn't. Because you couldn't listen to it, I was just getting it from tweets that people were sending. It was hard to sort of make out what was going on, and that made me sad. I wish that I could have followed it better so that I could have written about it. But at the end of the day, I wanted to get off of work and go have a drink. Yeah,
see, this is where I think if some entrepreneur would come up with the Trump crime family channel, we could follow all these things. Remember Court TV came to fame during the OJ trial? Everybody, I gotta have Court TV so I can see the OJ trial. Right now, some entrepreneur could, some enterprising entrepreneur could come up with a channel to televise this stuff so we could then all watch it in real time.
I know, and what's crazy is, there is so much opportunity for people to get involved in government by watching the crazy that unfolds in courtrooms all around the country. That is such a rare opportunity for people to be able to tune in to nutty stuff. I don't know if you saw this week the nuttiness that went down at school board meetings and city councils, all of these local level governments where people are losing their minds over fake conspiracy theories. And so it's just there's such a great world out there that we could be televising. We could add to our
entertaining.
They could be a whole different kind of Shark Week. I don't know.
Well, critical race theory week. The number of people that I've come across who are basically losing their mind over something they don't know anything about is quite amusing to me. And look, you had General Milley yesterday making the comment that, I agreed with, maybe we should learn more about this stuff, and maybe we should have an understanding of things. And maybe we might want to know why we have, white people who are so ticked off enough, to try and overthrow our Constitution. Maybe we might want to learn. Maybe we might want to understand. Maybe we might want to, think. Maybe.
Just a thought. That's one of the things that I feel like Milley talked about, but didn't really expand on, this idea of, as a person in the military, you want to have as much information as possible. You want to know everything about your opposition that you possibly can. So this idea of learning and understanding everything about the angry, crazy white guys who are trying to stage an insurrection at the Capitol, this is important information that our law enforcement needs to know about. It's the reason that I think the FBI has been following this for a really long time. These militia groups and these, just random angry guys who can't get laid. And so there is a point of this that, obviously Matt Gaetz is never really fully going to understand, but you would think that some of the smarter people in the room would have understood. And Miley talked about, General Milley talked about, Milley or Miley? Anyway, he talked about how he has read the Communist Manifesto. He's read Mao. And reading the Communist Manifesto does not turn him into a communist, just like reading the Old Testament doesn't turn you into a Jew. Watching Passion of the Christ doesn't make me Jesus. Like, this is not hard to understand. So I wish it did. I wish I could watch all kinds of cooking shows and immediately become the best chef in the world, but it doesn't work out that way.
See, but the problem is the people who did watch Passion of the Christ then did believe that they were. So you got to know the audience. You got to know who you're talking to.
Mel Gibson totally thinks that he's the second coming. Donald Trump probably does too.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt that. But I'm looking at this, and I'm watching the clip. I've watched it a couple of times, and I couldn't help. And maybe you'll agree with me, or maybe you won't. I don't know. I couldn't help but think that I'm looking at General Milley, and I'm going, this is a guy I don't know that I would want to tussle with, Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at someone like Matt Gaetz, who I'm sure that the teenage girl that he was raping, could probably kick his behind. And I'm going, in the old days, someone like Milley would have just, I don't know, smacked the living, what out of him, and we wouldn't have had this problem.
He wouldn't even have had to done that much. He could have just tousled his hair, and Matt Gaetz would just lose his mind. But yeah, it's funny because there was another guy that was there who was a Florida congressman named Mike Waltz. And he is the one who is the Green Beret that Milley was talking about whenever he said, we're both Green Berets. He wasn't talking about Matt Gaetz.
No.
So a lot of people don't really know that. And what's funny is that because a lot of folks didn't see the full clip, they thought that he was just talking about Matt Gaetz. So there were so many jokes last night about the only thing that Matt Gaetz has been a Green Beret in is keg stands, stuff like that. That was just priceless. Oh, it was so good. So, I mean, that ended up being some comedy for a while. But yeah, this is the highest military figure in the United States. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And a couple of people talked about the stripes on his arm, which signify 6 months of combat. He's got 4 stars on his shoulders. He's got a whole chest full of different bands. This is the guy who is a BFD, and these members of Congress, these Republicans, they don't treat him with any respect at all. And at the very least, whether I agree with the guy or not, you at least honor the uniform, right? And honor the fact that he could sit on you and probably kill you with his pinky.
Or just sneeze on you, and that'd be the end of you.
Yeah.
No, and this is where I'm like, someone like Gaetz, I'm sorry, you should sit down and you should really not talk. But the thing is, as I said at the beginning of the show, one of these things that I learned about in school was the communist hysteria of the 50s. And, people ratting on each other and, all of this kind of insanity of that era, this kind of, as I read about it back then, I'm going, how could people be so stupid? How could you do that? How could you turn your neighbor in? I'm looking at this going, there's some craziness going on.
Yeah. And it's really scary because now it's just, there are parts of me who think, are there insurrectionists that we should be turning in? And then it makes me think that, oh God, I've become McCarthy, the McCarthy of insurrectionists. But yeah, these crazy people who think that somehow the military is less than because they are learning more. We used to prize education. We used to view Ivy League schools as this big thing that everyone should strive to get into. And people like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz all went to Harvard and Stanford and Yale. And now they're talking about it as if it's bad because it's some form of elitism because people know a lot of stuff.
Evidently not.
Yeah, clearly not. Or, the other part of this is a lot of times I look at Ted Cruz, and obviously he has the political wherewithal of a goldfish, but he, I don't know that he is necessarily as stupid as he pretends to be. I would think that he knows, he has a little bit more nuance in his brain. Yeah. He's probably read the Communist Manifesto, and he just doesn't want to admit it. But, intellectualism is not bad. Being smart is not bad. Some of the best things in the world have been created by nerds, and we thank them for it. The Google, the internet, the cell phones, all of these things that the nerds have brought us. So maybe intellectualism is not the end of the United States as we know it.
But Matt Gaetz has taken a stance, though. He has he stood up on his two little tiny weak ankles, and he's taken a stand to free Britney Spears.
That doesn't surprise me. He probably thinks that he could end up dating her somehow.
I think that's Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz did it too.
I wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that was one of the things that you heard about Katie Hill, one of the really sad stories about why Matt Gaetz was really supportive of Katie Hill whenever the revenge photos came out with her, is he thought that if he was nice to her, then he could end up sleeping with her. And you just have to wonder, like, how much of that is, does he really just want to sleep with Britney Spears so he can brag about it? That wouldn't surprise me.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, of course not. But I still don't think that's worth someone getting involved in, especially while you're attacking our military leaders. Anyway, let's move along. Evidently, Trump very unhappy with Michigan right now. The Michigan Senate Oversight Committee has come out and said, hey, there was nothing there, even though Michigan is still moving forward with trying to suppress the vote anyway. But they didn't find anything, and Trump ain't happy about it.
No, and he released a statement where he basically waged a war against the two Republicans, like the Senate majority leader, and then the guy who was the head of the committee. So, I mean, gauntlets have been thrown. It's coming, I guess, where Trump is going to try and flex his muscle and take down some state level Michigan Republicans, to which I say, let me open the door for you.
Yeah. Here, let me hold your beer.
Yes.
Here's another
Please.
one.
By all means.
By all means. No, but this is I think Trump needs a job.
Yes.
He needs something to do, because the day before he's going to sue Saturday Night Live because they had the audacity to put out the clip of him, singing the Wings song or whatever it was, which I had forgotten he did. And it looked, it was somewhat funny and sad and all at the same time, but it was Saturday Night Live. So I forgive you for doing those things, because that's what it's there for. He not happy.
No, and I get it, I guess. If politicians take themselves so seriously that they can't handle Saturday Night Live, then there's something wrong with you. Be able to laugh at yourself. Joe Biden laughs at himself. If you remember, George W. Bush invited Dana Carvey to the White House, or was it H.W. Bush? Anyway, one of the Bushes invited Dana Carvey to the White House, and they did like a thing. And have fun with it, and enjoy the humor of the moment. Politics is so difficult and sad and crazy and mean, and so at least give people the humor of. Yeah.
No, it was H.W.
SNL
Bush
at the end of the week.
It was H.W. who did it, but to be honest, I didn't want George Bush as president, but I thought he was funny. I thought those press club dinners, I thought he actually was pretty funny. He was self-deprecating and could take a good joke, and told a joke about his vice president being afraid of his vice president because the vice president can shoot somebody in the face and get away with it.
Well,
look, I don't blame him for being afraid of Cheney.
Yeah, right. All of us should be. I'm surprised that Liz Cheney hasn't made a few jokes about, if you don't be nicer to me, I'm going to have my dad shoot you in the face. But that's just me. But yeah, I think, maybe if you've done a whole lot of cocaine and been an alcoholic, then you have a sense of humor about things over time.
Maybe there you go. Last thing I wanted to get into, evidently we're now getting to the point where people are pleading guilty to the January 6th insurrection. And I got to tell you, I'm not happy. I'm not happy with the people getting probation and $500 fines. And I wanted serious fines. I wanted jail time. I wanted something to show how serious this was. to tell future insurrectioners that, hey, don't do this. We're now sending the message that, yeah, go ahead, go smash up the Capitol, beat up a bunch of cops on the lawn, do those things. We'll give you a little slap on the wrist because, hey, you're white. It's okay. We didn't shoot you. We didn't shoot many of you.
Yeah, no, I'm curious about that too. There are people who absolutely deserve much more significant charges, and I wonder what is in this plea deal for the first woman who got her sentence. I don't know if maybe there's a bigger fish. That's the only thing that I could think is that there's somebody that these are lower level people who basically hung somebody out to dry. Like Joel Greenberg in Florida, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that I can think. But I get it. There's this idea of the first offense. Generally judges sort of go lenient if you don't have a criminal history.
Yeah,
I wish that applied across the board from white people to people of color as well. But
Yeah, so I murdered someone. It was a first offense. Can I get probation?
Right. Look at what the discrepancy between people who actively knew that they were committing fraud by voting for their dead parent versus the woman who didn't know that she couldn't vote, and this guy gets off and she gets 5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a completely jacked up judicial system, and perhaps if we had TVs and radio to watch what was going on, then we'd see more of an uprising from the citizenry.
Yeah, I don't think so. But this is one of those things. I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping there are bigger fish to be fried down the road. I'm hoping that there are some significant fines, and I'm hoping that they go after the moneyed people who funded all this. But sadly, I know that's not going to happen.
Well, that's interesting because they are talking about that. There was one lawsuit. Oh, and I can't remember who it was, but there was somebody because they're using some kind of antitrust suit, and they're doing something with RICO laws for somebody. I need to look this up because I heard it. It was on Nicole Wallace this week, and I just sort of barely heard it in passing. But I think Frank Puglisi was talking about it, and that there is, there are investigations to figure out who is funding this because it. I remember what it was. It's the terrorism statute, because he said if you're a member of Al Qaeda and somebody pays for you to go to Washington and basically do what the insurrectionists did,
right,
then you would be funding, material something to terrorism. And what he has talked about is that because there is no terrorism law, domestic terrorism law, it makes it so different where each individual case is part of something else. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't then go after the same people for the same crimes. It's just spread out. It's not, a big lump thing of all of you people are in a terrorist group and we can charge you all at once together.
Okay, so if they're all flying Al Qaeda's flag under terrorism laws, you could then charge all of them. But because they had Trump's flag, which I view almost the same, you can't do it.
Or a Proud Boy logo or the Oath Keepers logo, like all of these people. So if this was a domestic terrorism, if there were domestic terrorism laws like this, then we could do something like that. You would think after April 19th, when what's his name, Tim McVeigh bombed the Murrah building, that they would have created some of these laws, but they didn't. And I would hope that this would spur on some kind of realization that they should update these.
Yeah, but terrorism laws should be terrorism laws. Should it matter if it's foreign terrorist or domestic? Should it matter?
It shouldn't. It absolutely shouldn't. But because of the way that the law is written now, it does. And it's not necessarily because there's some special domestic law. It's because there was a declaration that opened a forever open case on Al Qaeda. So if there's any kind of, Al Qaeda something related in the United States, it all gets lumped into this one specific case, or this way of trying cases.
Right.
And they don't do that, I guess, with domestic stuff.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
I wish I was a lawyer. I don't know as much about it.
Go back to school. I know I said last thing, but I have to throw this in. Yesterday, the Supreme Court decided 8-1 that the girl from here in Pennsylvania who said F everything, she's right. The school was wrong. I actually agree with the Supreme Court. My problem is someone should smack her parents.
Why should they smack her parents?
Because they're the ones who took this to the Supreme Court. Had I written this as a kid, and I would have come home and I would have said to my mother I got suspended from school because I said F everything, I would have gotten 1, my mouth washed out with soap, 2, beaten, and told I was wrong, and that leave the school out of this.
Well, the difference is she didn't say it in school.
No
she said
difference.
It off of campus.
No difference. It didn't matter.
That's the difference, though. That was the
I get that. The Supreme Court was right. The court was right. The school shouldn't have done it. The parents are wrong. That's my point.
I don't know. Because I do think that this is an important precedent that I worry that schools, try to, I obviously have authority issues. So they impose this sort of, blanket of anything that you ever do, we can suspend you for.
We're not disagreeing.
There has to be a line.
We're not disagreeing.
So, but without this case, that sets a line, and I think that line is really important.
But we're not disagreeing that they shouldn't have. It's the parents'
But without
fault.
her parents taking that to court, we wouldn't have that. I don't care what her parents, if her parents ground her or whatever the hell, or wash her mouth out with soap. It doesn't matter to me. But this is an important case. This goes back to the high school kid who was, having the big banner for whatever cause in the 90s that he won at the Supreme Court for. It's the same kind of thing. Like, there is a freedom of speech issue, and you don't check that at the door of your high school.
No, we don't disagree. But where we disagree is shouldn't have happened. His parents shouldn't have done it. Just my thought. Anyway, I thought that was going to go a better direction, but no, you had to go. You had to go and be all smarty pants and all of that.
I have authority issues.
As do I.
Have we met?
All right, good stuff, Sarah. I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at RawStory, even if she doesn't agree with me on this. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The threat is salt water creeping in from the ocean further into the Delta, now threatening to contaminate freshwater supplies for central and southern California.
Worsening drought conditions threaten drinking water supplies in California. Alarming heat wave hits the Siberian Arctic. Plus, grim UN draft report warns climate change tipping points are upon us, and the worst is yet to come.
All of that grim news, as usual, straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We have spent the last 2 decades in perpetual drought here, yet almond farmers in California have doubled in that time. Despite the fact that almond production alone uses more water than all the humans and businesses in San Francisco and Los Angeles combined. That wasn't a problem back when it rained. But now there simply isn't enough water to go around, and we have to make a painful choice, getting it to the people or getting it in the nuts.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, a big chunk of the U.S. over the past week or so has been in a terrible heat wave, but we should note it is not just affecting the U.S.
No, it is not. As we go to air, climate scientists are expressing alarm at shockingly high temperatures broiling the Arctic. An intense and expansive heat wave has gripped parts of Siberia, northwestern Russia, and Scandinavia. Ground surface temperatures across Siberia this week shot up above 90 degrees Fahrenheit and spiked as high as 118 degrees in some areas.
90 and 100 degrees in the Siberian Arctic.
118 degrees in Siberia, rivaling Las Vegas during this most recent heat wave.
Wow.
And it's not over. The National Weather Service is forecasting, quote, a new record-breaking and dangerous heat wave for the Pacific Northwest, a region where there isn't widespread air conditioning. But there's also a chance that smoke from wildfires sparked by the extreme heat conditions could help by dimming some of the sun's heat. So, yay?
Yeah, we're being saved by wildfires? Really?
A new study confirms that, yes, man-made climate change is intensifying these extreme record-breaking heat waves in the U.S.
Who could have guessed it?
A Lawrence Berkeley National Lab analysis has concluded that man-made global warming has caused these rare heat events to be 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit hotter in most of the United States. New consequences are unfolding from the climate change intensified mega drought emerging in the West. In eastern Arizona, water levels in Lake San Carlos have fallen so low that fire crews can't use it to fight fires. In Sacramento, California, cutbacks in water releases from the state's reservoirs have severely reduced river flows, which in turn is allowing salt water from the ocean to intrude inland, threatening to contaminate fresh water supplies. State water officials have hastily begun building an emergency barrier across a major waterway in the Sacramento River Delta to stop the saltwater creep, according to Ryan Reeves of the California Department of Water Resources in an interview with KCRA.
The emergency drought barrier is not one we take on lightly. I mean, it does include the word emergency in it. We consider it to be an emergency action. You know, we would not be doing this project if it wasn't serious.
Meanwhile, a new draft report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change highlights that adaptation efforts are not moving fast enough. The massive draft report, obtained by Agence France-Presse and due out in 2022, is grim. It warns that the planet is rapidly approaching tipping points that could set off feedback loops that further amplify global warming, saying, quote, the worst is yet to come. Some serious climate impacts are already baked in and will hit sooner than previously projected, fundamentally reshaping life on Earth in coming decades. And that's even if nations are able to cut the greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change.
You are grim today, Desi Doyen.
It includes water shortages and crop failures, deadly heat waves, ecosystem collapse, species extinction, and rising seas inundating coastal communities. The IPCC draft report also starkly warns that efforts to adapt and prepare for climate impacts are too slow. Quote, current levels of adaptation will be inadequate to respond to future climate risks. Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg, in an interview with AFP, found a ray of qualified hope.
It seems that many people are becoming more and more ready to tell it like it is. And we can, of course, not face this crisis unless we tell it like it is, unless we are adult enough to tell the truth. This could be something that could lead to something that could wake people up, which is very hopeful.
What does it say when we have to turn to Greta Thunberg for good news to cheer us up? Good Lord. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. We'll be off for a week or so until after the July 4th holiday. Please have a safe, happy, and cool one if possible. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's being reported that nearly all of the people who are dying from COVID-19 are people who were not vaccinated. They say that the deaths per day are down under 300, and the number of people that they're saying who are partially vaccinated or are vaccinated who are dying are less than 5 per day. And this is one of those moments where you go, yeah, that's the point. Get vaccinated, little protection. Even if you do get it, it's not going to be, they say it's not going to be horrible. At this point, and this is where I've been saying all along, at this point, if you choose not to be vaccinated, I don't have any problems with you going away. It's how we thin the herd. It's how we get rid of the dumb ones, and hopefully they don't reproduce. And I know that's so mean and cruel. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you. I'll be slightly nicer, but not too much nicer.
No, I mean, at this point, I mean, you see what's going on. At this
I
point,
said slightly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to get past this, and my fear is the states that they're saying with this new variant coming out that are not getting vaccinated because they're what is it, the vaccine hesitancy, or just plain stupidity is going to cause something to flame up in the fall, and maybe we lose a bunch more.
Right, and it's said today, just what you were saying, that the adult deaths from COVID are, at this point in time, entirely, not mostly, entirely preventable. I look at the state of Ohio. A great percentage of I won't say all, but I mean most, but a great percentage of the healthcare workers that were in the nursing homes didn't get vaccinated. All right? San Francisco is requiring all its workers to be, vaccinated. Now, somebody's going to file a lawsuit. I understand that.
Right.
When you look at this, you start to say, okay, where are we at? And, of course, the media starts to say, well, the president didn't reach his goal. I mean, we're getting there. But the bottom line is there's percentage-wise, younger people that don't want to do it. And here's what I argue. This isn't the complete reason. I'm not trying to overdo this, Rick, but the minute the CDC said, well, if you're vaccinated, you can take your mask off.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? When I walked into, Home Depot and Lowe's and, other places, everybody was vaccinated, Rick. Everybody.
100%.
Oh, yeah, 100%. They took off their masks. 100%.
Yep.
The minute the CDC did that, I think they did more to hurt the issue, because let's face it, after a while, if you're not vaccinated and you have to wear a mask and you hate it, you know what you might do? You might get vaccinated.
You might turn around and do it. But here's the thing. At this point, I don't care. At this point, we now know if you didn't get vaccinated, you might get it. And if you get it, you're going to die. And I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. They're taking the chance. But when you look around, people act like it's done. It's finished. It's gone. It's okay. Everybody has their masks off. And I just thought about it today. I mean, I'm vaccinated. I had my father vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. And I was at a meeting tonight earlier, and I looked around, and nobody in the room had a mask. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, who in this room, is not honest and has not been vaccinated and is potentially passing that virus to somebody else in this room tonight?
It's a good question.
I mean, I thought about it.
Yeah, but I keep coming back to, and maybe I just have too much, thought that the vaccine's gonna help. I'm of the thing, well, okay, we've got to this point now. We're not going backwards. We're not shutting down again. That's never going to happen. This is where the ones who were the ones who weren't going to get it, maybe they have to go, because there's no reason at this moment for not having had the vaccine. There's no reason, because it's been plentiful, and this is where I don't blame the Biden administration if they don't meet their targets, because it's available. Now you could go, well, if there were shortages and we didn't have enough needles or enough people to do it, or locations, if logistically there were problems, then you blame them. But we don't have those problems. It's plentiful.
Right. And that's why I never criticized DeWine in Ohio, or other governors who had a lottery, and if you got vaccinated, because I feel anything you could or need to do, you do it. Yep. For have an incentive, unless somebody is willing at some point in time to pull the trigger and say, well, if you're not vaccinated, you're not going to do the following things, and you have to have your proof of vaccination. Now, I know that's a whole great big debate down the road. Don't get me wrong, but if this comes back, if the Delta variant raises its head and this comes back, what do you do?
Yeah.
Where does this go? Do you require people in the workplace to have the vaccination? Because is that fair to people, who are vaccinated in the workplace and the other ones aren't? I mean, there's all kinds of issues that very well may come to a head if the variant raises its head.
No, we're definitely in one of those moments where we're we're on the right track. We're heading possibly
Right.
to an end, and some among us are going to screw it up.
And we're close. I mean, we really are. The president hasn't reached the exact goal, but it's close. I mean, it's getting there. It's just a certain amount of people that you right now you can't budge them.
Yeah. We'll see how this plays out. I wanted to get to a couple of the top stories of the day. Rudy suspended law license. Poor Rudy.
Mm-hmm. I saw a lawyer defending him on Facebook, and it was like, I thought, how can you defend him? I mean, it's malpractice. It's exactly what it is as a lawyer. Malpractice.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, he didn't show up to his hearing today. There was the hearing for Dominion voting systems. The MyPillow guy was there, though, and so was Alan Dershowitz. So Alan was there, but no Rudy.
No Rudy. Right.
I can't wait.
He made so many false statements, and now, of course, he's in some jeopardy because his law license has been pulled. So Dominion has some pretty good arguments.
Going to be interesting to see. I want to hear that. I see. This is where I said earlier, I would love to see like a Trump crime family channel, like a Trump crime channel. Some enterprising entrepreneur come up with a channel to follow all of these hearings, so we can watch this stuff in real time. Kind of like, remember Court TV when it came to fame with the OJ trial?
Mm-hmm.
Have one of those so we can watch this stuff, because I want to see all of the evidence that comes out in these. I mean, they're usually boring civil trials, but with the MyPillow guy and that Sidney Powell and Rudy and all of those characters and Lynn Wood and all of those, this is entertaining stuff.
Dominion. I mean, Dominion's relentless, and it's very interesting, and they've got a lot of oomph behind them, and they're going after it. So I think that it's going to be interesting how that plays out to the end with judgments.
Should we make fun of Giuliani's kid for his impassioned plea, only half his face showing in the camera, or should we leave poor Andrew alone since he's had it rough all along?
Andrew has enough issues. Because I remember when he came out the last time. I remember a couple months ago, and he did that press conference, came out and made a couple bizarre statements and walked away.
Yeah, I'm not answering any questions.
Okay, what was that? You know, right.
But he gave this speech, and I wonder if there was anyone there. If it was just him screaming in an empty parking lot.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's bizarre how Giuliani went from the nation's mayor to how he's ending up. Yeah. Very bizarre.
Very, very bizarre. Right. The big story today: a bipartisan agreement potentially on a pretty sizable $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, about $559 billion in new spending, I guess. Is this a good thing? Is this a big deal?
Well, it's a big deal, but I'm still going to handicap this at 75% potential to become law. I'm going to handicap it.
All right, so you think the 11 Republicans who have come forth and said that they're going to support it, going to probably be offset by Bernie and some of the a couple of Democrats?
Well, here, I mean, a very fascinating twist today when the Speaker and Schumer, but the Speaker announced that there will be a reconciliation bill before the House passes the bipartisan measure. So, number one, the Speaker is recognizing that a bipartisan measure will most likely pass. Number two, the Speaker in saying everything else that you didn't get in the infrastructure bill you'll have in reconciliation is a commitment out there to the progressives to calm them down.
Right.
And the reason I say this is that, look, the power of the presidency today, and the presidency is powerful, and Biden knows how to utilize that, power for lawmaking. He does. He's been around, forever on that. But I don't think we need to think that the endorsement today by the president makes it the done deal. It doesn't, because of the fact that, we got to see the progressive kind of anger about not having everything in the piece of legislation. Does it spill out or not? Yes. Do other votes counter, the Republicans that are on board? Now, I think, they'll pass an infrastructure measure, but again, now the Speaker says, well, we will pass that after the Senate passes reconciliation. And in reconciliation, then the progressives will try to get, what's missing in the infrastructure bill and some other things. And then you will see, because, I was part of the Republican caucuses for years, I know how they think, and what you will then see is the Republicans having a mantra: if the infrastructure bill doesn't move in the House after it passes the Senate, because it has to go back to the House, you'll see Republicans saying they care about defunding the police, they care about people, crossing the border as they please. They obviously don't care about infrastructure. The Republicans will attempt to do what they did with health care. They'll attempt to reverse infrastructure on the Democrats. They're the ones that are holding it up because of a, quote, progressive socialist agenda. I mean, the buzzwords that they're going to use out there. So it's a very interesting, kind of razor's edge right now to see where it all ends up. I'm still going to put it, though, at 75%.
Yeah. No, something needs to get done. But you're not wrong on all the other stuff. And I don't see a defunding of the police happening, especially because yesterday you also had the president proposing additional police spending, and doing what was it, community violence intervention programs. I mean, spending a lot more money on different avenues of policing, but definitely not defunding them.
Yes, and see, you have to look at what the speaker's saying, and look, it's congressional speak, and she will hold to her commitment. She's telling the progressives that until a reconciliation bill passes, we're not passing the infrastructure bill the Senate's going to send them. Now, at that point in time, the progressives will most likely try a semi-defunding of the police or tweaking it, whatever you want to call it, right? But we know from the election in New York with the Democratic primary that the candidate ran on not defunding the police. So if the progressives, not all of them, but a group of them, try to put in some defunding measures into reconciliation, which the speaker said, she won't pass infrastructure to a reconciliation. They try to do that, and they're not successful because they're not going to be, because the majority of the Democratic caucus will not do a defund measure, and the president won't. But if they're not successive, is that enough where the speaker says, hey, you had your shot in reconciliation, and now we passed reconciliation, you didn't get your amendments, we're now going to do infrastructure. You see where I'm going with that? She's not lying. She holds to her word. She's giving them an option to try to get things, and let's see if they do or they don't. And, you fight the good battle, but in the long run, if you don't make your amendments, then I would assume the progressive side is going to say, okay, you try again some other day, what we didn't get, but we're going to go with the infrastructure. So that's why I still give it a 75% chance through the system. It's just going to have some, political barbs here and there.
Yeah, but there's some things that were taken out of the infrastructure bill that the progressives are clearly going to want.
Oh, yeah.
Elder care, some money for housing.
Sure.
I think there was a little bit of money for electric vehicles, if I'm not mistaken, but not near the number that they were looking at. So could it be that that budget reconciliation bill is where that stuff goes a lot heavily, and maybe not the, because look, defunding the police is not popular. It's not even popular with the majority of the Democrats, I don't think.
Oh, correct. But, they're going to have to probably have an amendment process, and, they won't win on it, whoever wants to do that. But you're right. Of the four components of the transportation bill, because it's broken down to four components, let's say that two of them didn't get in. But part of the third one, the electric car components and climate, that got in. And so, yes, in reconciliation, they will attempt to add the other two parts in there. And look, let's face it, if the Republicans, get in on board on infrastructure, it's reconciliation. They can afford to lose because they'll probably get some things in reconciliation they want.
Yeah.
And they'll afford to lose, quote, on the infrastructure part, and then eventually everybody's kind of happy with it.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. Last bit I wanted to get for you. The intelligence agencies are saying, according to the Wall Street Journal, that once we're out of Afghanistan, they're predicting the Afghan government is going to fall. Thoughts?
Well, I think potentially it could. There's ways that we can help the Afghan government. I was there twice, and I can tell you that we had a very strange military mission, and strange in the sense that It was civil and military. It was explained to us when we were there, because part of it was building water wells, and Afghanistan only had 20,000 telephones. None of the government had computers. So we undertook that mission to do what I call the civil side of it too, which really helps the government. But after all, are we going to spend another 25 years doing that? No. I think most people agree, to get out. Now, as far as the fall of the Afghan government, us staying there another 10 years doesn't necessarily mean that the government survives anyway. It will be incumbent upon, I think, the United Nations, the European countries, the United States, to, they can do some monetary support. The stronger the Afghan government becomes in building itself and bringing itself into the modern world and providing some economic jobs, little micro businesses, the better off it has a chance to survive. But if they say, well, we have to stay there or it's going to fall, if that's the case, it's going to fall anyway.
Yeah. No, because I'm looking at these stories and I'm going, no, I'm not falling for this. No, I'm sorry if it falls. That's their problem. We shouldn't have been there this long. We got to get out.
And plus, let's look at something here. New intelligence assessment says that. If there was ever, Trump had, what did he call it? The secret government? What did he term that?
The deep state.
The deep state. Look, if there's ever been a deep state, it's not aimed at a president, but it's portions of our intel agencies that do things like lie to members of Congress about, what Iraq was really doing. There's rogue elements in there. If there's anything that's ever been a, quote, deep state, it's not against a certain president, but it's faulty intelligence or intelligence that's manipulated. And, some of these intel people, I think, tend to be in bed with the defense companies that make a fortune when we do things, to stay places in military equipment. And I think some of these assessments are leaked with no proof that, well, if we don't stay there, and, maybe that will happen. I don't know. But I am very suspicious of last-minute. Where were these intel statements when Trump was talking about taking troops out of Afghanistan? Where were those intel? Now it's the last-minute, sort of the scare tactic.
No, I'm with you. Eisenhower said, be wary of the military-industrial complex, and I always am. But now the good thing is they're building. They're going to be building postal trucks, so that'll get them away from bombs and stuff. And we need better postal trucks. That'll be a start.
Right, and just this week, all of a sudden, our American intel agencies are revising the previously, as the Wall Street Journal article said, the previously optimistic estimates. And all of a sudden, well, it's all changing this week. We better have our last minute try to, to keep us there. I don't trust a lot of these, intel sources.
Right there with you. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. And look, I saw that and I'm like going, here we go again. The defense contractors need a bonus for the next quarter. Need to figure out how to keep us involved in another decade of war. I mean, you think about it. September 11th was almost 20 years ago. I mean, think about how long we've been in Afghanistan. How much resource, how much blood, how much treasure. And we made big rocks smaller. And not a lot more. So I'm not in favor of staying whatsoever. And finally, Friday, evidently Derek Chauvin is going to be sentenced. I'm guessing. This is the way the story is. He will be sentenced on the second-degree unintentional murder charge. He was convicted of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter for his killing. From what the reports are, he's going to be sentenced only, for the most serious, which is second-degree murder. And that could get him 30 years. I guess I could get a maximum of 40, but the experts are saying probably going to be 30. I'm saying he'll probably get the 30 that they're saying, but I fear that well, we end up seeing a mistrial down the road because they're already laying the groundwork. Because one of the jurors showed up at a Black Lives Matter protest, and I just see down the road the people in the appeals process going, I don't know, that doesn't seem right. Try him again, and then who knows where things go. But we'll find out what the judge comes up with on Friday. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick